Manchester United will face Spanish opposition for the third successive Europa League knockout round after being pitted against Sevilla in the last 8. In the round of 16, Erik ten Hag's side followed up their 4-1 home win in the first leg with a 1-0 victory over Real Betis at the Benito Villamarin Stadium on Thursday night, with Marcus Rashford once again on the scoresheet for the Reds. United are the only remaining Premier League side in the competition after Arsenal were knocked out on penalties by Sporting CP last night. Should United negotiate the tie against Sevilla, they will face the winner of Juventus versus Sporting CP in the semi-finals. The quarter-finals will be held on April 13 and April 20, before the semi-finals on May 11 and May 18, and the final on May 31. 13:20 Key event. Ten Hag reacts to Sevilla Europa League draw. 12:55 Dan Brown United vs Sevilla head-to-head. United wins. 0 draws. 1 Sevilla wins. 212-50 Dan Brown. A reminder of the draw in full. 12:48 Dan Brown. Almost. History makers. 12:28 Key eventfull story. United to face Sevilla. Man United will play Sevilla in the Europa League quarter-finals after Erik ten Hag's side were drawn against the Spanish side on Friday afternoon. The Reds will face either Juventus or Sporting CP in the semi-finals if they overcome the La Liga outfit. Click here to read more. 12:25 Dan Brown. Yet another Spanish assignment for United. The Reds really must be sick to the back teeth of traveling to Spain. After facing Real Sociedad in the group stages, Barcelona in the knockout round and Real Betis in the last 16, they must now get past Sevilla. The first leg will take place at Old Trafford on Thursday, April 13, and the return fixture in Spain will be staged on Thursday, April 20. 12:22 Dan Brown quarter-finals draw in full. Man Utd vs Sevilla. Juventus vs Sporting CP. Bayer Leverkusen vs Union Saint-Gilloise. Feyenoord vs Roma. 12:15 Dan Brown semi-final tie. 2 Feyenoord, Roma vs Bayer Leverkusen, USG 12:14 KEY event semi-final tie. 1 Juventus, Sporting vs United, Sevilla. 12:13 Dan Brown tie. 4 Feyenoord vs Roma. 12:12 Dan Brown tie. 3 Bayer Leverkusen vs Union Saint-Gilloise. 12:12 Dan Brown tie. 2 Juventus vs Sporting. 12:11 Key event tie. 1 United vs Sevilla. 12:10 Dan Brown. It's time for the draw. We're about to get started. 12:07 Dan Brown Zoltan Jera on stage. Former Fulham man Zoltan Jera is now on stage. He is the Europa League final ambassador this year. He scored 1 goal against United in his career, which came in 2009. 12:05 Dan Brown UEFA Deputy General Secretary is on stage. UEFA Deputy General Secretary Giorgio Marchetti has arrived on stage and is now setting out the rules of the draw. We're only a few minutes away from getting started. Who will United be playing? 12:01 Dan Brown. It's draw time. Pedro Pinto is on stage and opening up proceedings, reflecting on last night's round of 16 second legs. 11:52 Dan Brown. The stage is set. 11:45 Dan Brown. Just 15 minutes to go. The quarter-finals draw is scheduled to start at 12 p.m. Keep the blog locked for all the very latest updates. 11:43 Dan Brown. Rashford tops Europa League scoring charts. Marcus Rashford has scored more goals than any other player in the Europa League this season. The England ace has bagged 6 times in Europe this term. 11:30 Dan Brown. 30 minutes to go. 11:22 Dan Brown. How the draw works at this stage of the Europa League. No teams are seeded and there is no country protection. This means that United can face either of the remaining 7 sides. The first team drawn plays its first match at home, against the second team drawn. This procedure is repeated with the remaining balls to complete the quarter-final pairings. 11:09 Dan Brown. Where is this season's final being held? After overcoming Real Betis, United will have ambitions of going all the way in the Europa League this term. If you are feeling confident, you might want to circle Wednesday, May 31st on your calendar. The final will take place in Hungary at the Puskás Arena, Budapest. 11 o'clock key event. 1 hour warning. The draw for the quarter-finals is scheduled to start at 12 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, meaning there is just 1 hour to go. Ahead of it getting underway, here are all of the details that you need to know about the draw. 10:38 Dan Brown. Quarter-finals draw simulated ahead of the real draw later today. Men Sport did a quick simulation of the draw to see who United could be pitted up against. Find out who they got by clicking here. 10:29 Dan Brown. When are the quarter-final ties played? The quarter-finals will be held on April 13th and April 20th. The winners of those ties will then compete in the semi-finals, scheduled for May 11th and May 18th, ahead of the final on May 31st. 10:23 Dan Brown. Best and worst case scenarios for United. The Reds are the favourites for the competition and will fancy their chances regardless of who they are paired with. Despite this, we took a look at the best and worst outcomes from the draw and assessed the sides left in the tournament. The Belgian side have enjoyed a rapid rise in recent seasons and sit second in their domestic league. They topped their Europa League group, ahead of Union Berlin, who they then knocked out in midweek. And while they will provide a tough test, United would expect to progress, and the relative lack of travel would be another bonus. They are not the side of old, but their lowly Serie opposition is misleading given they were imposed with a 15-point deduction earlier in the season. Without that sanction they'd be second, and in Dusan Vlahovic and Federico Chiesa they have matchwinners, not to mention former United pair Angel Di Maria and Paul Pogba. 10:08 Dan Brown. Outright odds to win the Europa League courtesy of Betfair. These are the latest odds for who will win the Europa League this season. 10:02 key even. Sir Jim Ratcliffe at Old Trafford. 9:54 Daniel Murphy. Pellistri has given Manchester United a different threat in their forward line after Real Betis' performance since signing for Manchester United. Facundo Pellistri had won 10 caps for Uruguay, started a game at a World Cup, played 35 times in La Liga but never begun a match for the club that paid €10 million for him. Until Thursday night in Seville, anyway. When United signed Pellistri in October 2020 they heralded their scouting operation. The winger had been tracked by both Madrid clubs and Juventus, but United had watched him extensively and were convinced of his class. It was the same window they signed another teenage right winger in Ahmad, lavishing a potential £45 million on them. They've spent another £158 million on wingers under the age of 22 since that window, in Jadon Sancho and Antony, so it would hardly be a surprise if Pellistri had become the forgotten man. The once exciting new toy that was now spending months down the back of the sofa,